Where do you want to start?
It's nice to see your face.
Me too.
In person.
Without a mask.
It's been over a year.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yet we've been working this whole time.
Working, developing, and figuring out how to be artists in virtual spaces, right? Or produce work and collaborate virtually.
Binationally,
Yeah.
across the border.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a wild ride.
So should we start about how this kind of started? How did it start? Well,
I mean, did this start with the invitation in November?
yeah, an invitation in November to think about collection pieces and maybe how we can think about them in a critical way and possibly respond. And so I think that this piece, the labor piece, was one of the works that maybe provided the museum with a prompt of like, you know, which collection pieces should we bring out and look at in connection to labor. So I think that was sort of the seed that started this process, was which collection works respond or represent labor from whose perspective. And so that was sort of the beginning. And it was in November, just a few months ago.
Yeah, and it was really interesting because the other prompt was talking about the gaze, who was doing the looking, who was being looked at. And it's so interesting because I feel like we had recently really started to think really critically about that in our own work. And it's so funny that the prompt and the invitation began with this piece, which is, I always think of this work as the beginning of our relationship with SMOCA as an institution, and so much of our work is really seated in the development of relationships, like our own relationship as artists, and then our relationship with the women of the Gabriela, which has been ongoing for about 5 years, a little bit longer. Yeah. And how fortuitous the timing was. Because of the work we had just done, we had been doing virtually with them. In the little workshops, and developing their own, and providing them tools to develop their own voice and their own aesthetic and their ability to present the way that they see the world, the way that they see themselves. It's been a real privilege to see that, like to be able to foment and support that development, because they've supported our work so much.
I know, I mean, just thinking about looking at being in this gallery right now and seeing how we've been able to represent the women, you know, through our artwork in multiple ways, and like seeing your work as well. And, you know, they've only seen these works on screens, you know, like on the computer screens, on phones and things like that. They've been so gracious through the process, and, you know, even though, you know, before we made these works, like we had conversations, where do you want to stand? What do you want to hold? You know, where do you want to be in the garden? There isn't anything like making your own portrait, right? Or completely being in charge of what's going to be portrayed. And so through this process of learning, you know, how do we teach and collaborate in virtual spaces, I'm just blown away by what they were able to develop. I mean, I knew it would be amazing. This is a 16-year-old organization that is, you know, the pillars are these women in this one neighborhood, and so the work is completely amazing. I knew the commitment was going to show an incredible outcome. But what's been most rewarding is the process. You know, our work is so process oriented, and with the women, it's sort of this full circle of, you know, we've been critical of trying to think about ethical ways and, thoughtful processes and how we're representing them, but for them to, learn and develop their own portraits has been my favorite sort of part of this project.
Yeah.
There's so many great parts, but man.
The thought that the skills are with them, the materials are accessible to them for the workshops, for the peer-to-peer learning to continue. The equipment is there, and I feel like this is a startling beginning to the way in which I know that they will also continue to support other women in their sphere. I just can't wait for that invitation we might get from them to participate in their exhibition. It's so funny that when we ask them to make self-portraits, I mean, we've been working together for over 10 years, for 11 years.
You and I.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
And we've never done self-portraits. These are our first. And it took that prompt in response.
Yeah, I mean, we invited them to make self-portraits, and then it wasn't until after that, and seeing their response, that grace and humility, and that playfulness of ay, cómo me voy a ver, ay, no, but then them being so committed and very much into learning about sort of contemporary and historical self-portraits. They were so committed to learning about that and interested, and it wasn't until after that when we were like, we need to implicate ourselves to this uncomfortable feeling and push ourselves to present self-portraits that we're proud of, where we take risks, because that's exactly what we were showing the women. We're showing them other women who are taking risks in self-portraiture, and that was an inspiring moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was just impossible to not heed that call, that strength and that vulnerability was disarming. I mean, the thought that I would willingly sit in front of a camera and try to do a self-portrait, thinking about how I want my own daughter to see me, my family, my friends, my collaborator. I don't think I would have done that if I hadn't been in collaboration with all of you. Because I see this collaboration as all 10 of us. I'll always be grateful for that push, that invitation.
And then another collaborator of yours is your mom.
My mom.
In that series, and probably also in setting up your self-portrait. She was there to help with placing the material. And
she's kind of always there. It's funny because I feel like she's likes to pretend like she doesn't enjoy it as much as she does. I think she loves it. Yeah, it was such a it just sort of happened. We were doing just a kind of technical test to see if the printing on her body would work. The portrait of her and my daughter, of Uma, intertwined. I thought it would just be a day for testing, and my child was sleeping, so I knew it was the time, and the printing just worked so beautifully. I just knew we had to seize the moment. and it culminated in like a 4-hour-long photo session. And then the process began of together, gazing together through all of the images, 400 plus images, to select 2 that where she felt comfortable, and that was a process. Talking about a Mexican woman's body on display, it was a process for her to allow herself to embody that beauty that I saw. And yeah, it was a beautiful collaboration. Yeah.
I really love it. I mean, our families are so important in all of this work, even if they're not shown in the imagery. But even caldo de pollo, our kids were there to witness this process. My other kids were with my mom. There's always in the background sometimes the support system that wouldn't make this work possible. All of the hours of Zoom meetings and trainings, behind this work, like our parents and our friends are with our kids. As artist mom, it's part of the work.
Yeah, I think it definitely takes a village to raise a child. It also takes a village for women artists to produce and to have and honor artistic process. It's so interesting too because the women, Rosalinda and Mati are sisters. Doña Eugenia and Alicia are mother-daughter. Doña Trini and Dulce are mother-daughter. Victoria is Doña Trini's daughter-in-law. So it was also like a familial collaboration for them as well.
It's this generational experience with, and then the kids are there, like present as well,
Yeah.
So it's been amazing.
Yeah, it's been a beautiful, I don't even know if I'd call it a project. It's just been like a beautiful way to live these last few months, the last 3 months, and to feel nourishment and love and companionship and collaboration and just like being in relationship with these amazing women, my mother, you, Julia Prieta Trabaja, Ami. It has just been a gift.
Absolutely.
Great way to end a year and a really incredible, powerful way to start 2021.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the relationship started with the women empowering us, showing us that you can have a lush community garden in the borderlands on, south of the border where electricity was just installed a few years ago. There's this community of women doing this work and making adobe bricks, making their own building together, raising livestock, having sewing and knitting sessions. So that was for me as a woman, where we've had to come to terms with the fact that language and skills like killing a chicken and butchering a chicken and making chicken soup, those skills have skipped over a few generations in my family, and so that void in a way has been replenished by this relationship. So it's been so giving in my experience, and to be able to share with Gabriela and to sort of to learn her family history, with these things of just everyday like survival, beauty, and so it's been empowerment on my end, and it's this reciprocity that keeps on going, so yes, we've provided these tools for them to do their thing and make the portraits, and in turn they're going to continue to empower themselves and their communities, and we're lucky enough to also reap the benefits of that empowerment. They're making videos on the process for making a community garden and home gardens, something that I don't have skills in this moment. So I'm looking forward to actually learning and implementing those skills from these women who are, so important in my life, and actually passing on that knowledge to my kids. So it's this continuum of empowerment, this reciprocity.
Absolutely. I mean, my daughter still talks about eating pollito. Mm-hmm. She's 3 years old. She will always have that with her. It will always shape her, this idea that you nurture an animal and the animal dies to nourish you, and that vegetables grow in a garden from the soil, and that it takes labor and time and care to make those things grow, and then that the gift of feeding a family, of cooking a meal is an act of service, it's an act of love. I mean, these women have given that to my child. That's powerful for her to know that at such an early age. And yeah, I mean, I think the women, I don't think I would be making my new body of work in the way in which it is shaping without without the reciprocity of being in relationship with these powerful women. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They're leaders in their own way, in very discreet ways. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think something that is, as you know, I'm Mexican. I was born in Mexico. And I think one of the biggest joys for me is that 8 of our collaborators live and work in Agua Prieta, Sonora, Mexico. And being able to facilitate this process of collaboration virtually, with me working from Phoenix, with you working from Douglas, Arizona, with them working in Agua Prieta, has just been, I thought it was going to be extremely challenging, but instead it has been so interesting.
Yeah, and it's this type of work can happen in collaboration binationally in spite of a global pandemic and in spite of one of the most detrimental presidential administrations, of our time. In spite of that, this can happen. This can be presented to the world, and in a way, it's a moment of truth, right? That we experience in our lives, and to sort of make it visual. We're complicating some of the stereotypes of, fronterizos, fronterizas, life on the border, and binationality in general.
Yeah, that so much beauty can happen in spite of all of that. Mm-hmm. It's such a testament.
It is.
And how much more could happen now, under different circumstances. Queremos dar nuestro agradecimiento por la confianza, por todo el tiempo dedicado y por seguir confiando en entrar en estas aventuras con nosotras. Estos años han sido maravillosos.
Muchas gracias, mujeres, y nos vamos a seguir juntas, creciendo nuestro proyecto, relación y haciendo cosas
que nos llenen de alegría, que nos llenen de nutrición.
De nutrición, sí.
En todo el sentido. Físico, espiritual, artístico.
Ujú.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias.